Okay, this is English 373, Week 2, Part 1. Welcome back. Hope your first week at school was good. Man, online education, ridiculous. I want to pick up exactly where I left off last time. I looked at we kind of introduced what people said about Macbeth. Um, and then I jumped to talking about a connected moment between the witches and Lady Macbeth. Um, Both the witches and Lady Macbeth are more powerful than your average, 13th century woman. And as a result, they are both characterized in terms of masculinity. That the witches have beards. Banquo says you should be beards. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. And Lady Macbeth prays to these kinds of evil spirits, murdering ministers. They're sightless substances. Um, and she does that, and the connection between the two moments. The connection between the two moments is that they are moments where powerful women are figured as men or masculine in some way. Lady Macbeth wants to become like a man, which she describes as being filled up full of cruelty, having no remorse for bad actions. Like that's her view of men, and she wants to become masculine in that very specific way. Um, and I told you I wanted to talk about two things in this play, that I was interested in talking about sort of masculinity and femininity and gender and stuff in the play. But I'm also interested in going over actors and stage stuff. And this point, this is one of the most important lessons that I have for you. And I make this point in all my classes. It comes up in all the classes that I teach. I guess it doesn't really come up in 101, but it comes up in all my other classes. And this has to do with how we interact with stories. It's a larger point about what stories do and what they can do. I think I'm going to sneeze. All right, it's not coming. All right, hold on a second. All right, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to sneeze, but I can't make it happen. So it's a really important point about how stories work. I mentioned last time that most of my students go to the movies. Most of my students' primary interaction with stories is through blockbuster movies. Blockbuster movies are designed to be escapist, in the sense that you have a bad day and you go escape into another world, and it's enjoyable because the movies tend to be like superhero movies or John Wick or Mission Impossible. They tend to be about powerful people. People often feel weak and helpless in their life. And it's the reason movies are escapist, because you get to escape into a fantasy world where you get to feel like you're a character who's very big and powerful and can solve major problems and is indestructible and invincible and awesome and good looking and gets the girl and all that stuff. So those movies, those are escapist things. Because my students' primary interaction with stories is blockbuster movies, they tend to expect all art everywhere to be escapist. And as I mentioned last time, Shakespeare doesn't really provide that kind of escape. Because it's actually the opposite of superhero movies. In a superhero movie, you see very powerful people winning and winning and winning. And that's what makes an escapist fantasy. Whereas in Shakespeare plays, you see very powerful people being destroyed. And by being destroyed, and we'll talk more about this, by forces inside themselves. In escapist blockbuster cinema, very powerful people win against external opponents. In Shakespeare, very powerful people are destroyed by forces in here, and I'll talk a bit more about that when we get farther into Macbeth. The point I want to make now is to talk about the way my students engage with literature, or stories at all, because of blockbuster cinema. And again, I love blockbuster cinema. Okay, I'm a big fan. I love Mission Impossible. I enjoy Fast and the Furious. I love Twilight. What else do I like? Mission Impossible movies are my dead favorite. I love this stuff. Although it will come as no surprise to you that my favorite superhero movie is Logan, because of course it's the one that's most like the Shakespeare play. And of course, then they quote Shakespeare in it, and that's a whole other thing. The way my students interact with stories is they're very interested in the way one character reacts to another. What these two characters are interacting, and this person is doing this. Why are they doing that? This person is doing that. Why are they doing that? Why does he act like that? Why does he act like that? If I was this guy, would I act like that? How could I avoid? If I was this guy, how could I avoid this situation? That tends to be what they do. And there's nothing wrong with that. You should keep doing that. It's a perfect. I'm not telling you to. I'm not telling. It's going to sound like I'm telling you to stop doing that. Don't stop doing that. It's a great idea. You'll see me do it all the time. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about Macbeth's psychology like he's a real guy. The reason people do that is because they tend to see stories as being like a window into another universe. And even though there's weird things that happen in the universe, like you get bit by a radioactive spider and you get superpowers, basically it's after that it's realistic, in the sense that it makes sense, and that you feel like you could live there. My students find, yeah, okay, I'll tell you a story. I was in class once, and I was teaching. It was a one-on-one class, and I was teaching my students about accents and dialects. I mean, people have different accents, and it tells you. A lot of people think they can tell something about you based off of your accent, and it's not really quite true. It's sort of a stereotype that people use, but they think they can. So, for example, a lot of people think Americans from the South who have thick Southern accents, y'all, are stupid. People will judge you based on your accent. And I mentioned The Lion King because my students like The Lion King, and I was saying, isn't it interesting that Mufasa has an American accent, but his brother Scar has a British accent? And actually, we could go farther. His brother Scar, it's British, but it is also effeminate, and upper class. So Mufasa has an American accent, but Scar talks like this. Oh, yes, of course. Yes. It's an effeminate British accent. It's really, I can't, I guess effeminate. I don't think I want to say gay, but it's sort of, it's effeminate. So I was asking my students why. Why would the people who made the movie have the two brothers have different accents? Usually brothers have the same accent. And one of my students raised her hand. It's going to sound like I'm making fun of the student. I'm not making fun of the student. Actually, it really helped me with my own thinking, and I'm glad she said this. But she raised her hand. And she said, maybe it's because the two brothers were raised by different they had different mothers, and that they were raised in different households, and that's why they have different accents, and that's why they don't get along, and that explains why Scar would attack Mufasa. And it was like a crazy answer, because do you see how she answered the question? She answered the question by inventing more story, because she wanted to keep the explanation in the world of The Lion King. Why is this character like, why is that character like that? Well, maybe this character grew up like this, and maybe this character grew up like that. She kept the explanation in the world of the story. Whereas what I was looking for was, why would the person who directed the movie give the lion this accent for the audience watching the movie at home? See, it's not about this. It's about this. The answer I was looking for, by the way, is that the reason why the director of the movie gave Scar an upper-class British effeminate accent is because Americans, on the whole, don't really like rich people, and they don't like gay people, and they don't like British people. And if you give a character an upper-class British effeminate accent, they will not like that person. And because they're a little homophobic and there's class issues involved in there, and they're a little xenophobic. Americans don't always like foreigners, and so the reason why Scar talks like that in The Lion King is it marks him as the bad guy. And that's fucked up because it involves a little bit of homophobia and a little bit of xenophobia, and it's a little, ugh. But you see, that answer has to do with the relationship between the director and I haven't decided whether I'm the director of the audience, between the director and the audience. So I don't always want questions answered in the world of the movie as if it were real. It's not real. It's made up by somebody. Somebody made up the movie, and then they gave it to me, the guy sitting in the seat. This is another way to answer questions. You can answer questions like this. Oh, I think they have different accents because they're raised by different mothers. Or you can do it like this. Oh, I think they have different accents because the director wanted to communicate to the audience watching the movie that that this is a bad guy. You're going to need both of those kinds of answers for this class. But I find that my students hate talking about this. They won't do it. They'll always talk like this, and they'll never talk like this. And the reason is, I think, that when you talk like this, it spoils the ability of the movie to be escapist, because it reminds you it's not a real world. Somebody made it up, and it's somebody invented it all for an audience. And they don't like to think of that. My students don't want to think about it as being invented for an audience. My students want to think about it as a real world in which this character and this character are real people, and they're friends. They just exist in this alternate universe that we can see through the window of the movie screen. Anyway, this is a really important way of interacting with Shakespeare. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about Shakespeare in this way. But and again, I'm not telling you not to talk about it like it's a real world. You'll see me. I'm about to have a whole thing very soon about Macbeth's psychology, and I'm going to treat him like he's a real person, not a fictional character. I just need you also to remember and to think about it in terms, not just in terms of the way the characters relate to each other in the world of the play, but also in terms of why did someone put these words in the characters' mouths and what does the audience get out of it? All right, I'll see you in the next video.